I just want to extend my welcome to all of you to be here on this lovely fall evening, especially those of you who come from other communities, from other colleges, from other universities. Very wonderful to have you among us as we have this exchange of scholarship, this exchange of ideas. This lecture series is named in honor of two individuals, Father John Marcoux of the Society of Jesus and of the Omaha de Porres Club that he founded on November 3rd, 1947, 64 years ago, on the feast of St. Martin de Porres, which is November 3rd. The club began meeting in what is now the Schleich Room on the 4th floor of Creighton Hall. Roger tells me that's just across from his office. This is also called the administration building by people who've been here longer. Father Marcoux mentored that club through the 1950s and the 1960s. For those who do not already know the details behind the story, let me mention a few of the major details. Now let's first start with St. Martin de Porres. He was born in 1579 in Lima, Peru, to unmarried parents, a Spanish nobleman who later became governor of Panama, and a free black woman, whose name was Ana. Martin's darker skin color initially led his father to reject him, although later, perhaps after Martin became famous, he reversed his stance. As a youth, Martin was apprenticed to a barber, and in those days, barbers often performed surgical or medical procedures. So Martin gained some skills and proficiency in medicine. At the age of 15, he entered the Dominican monastery, but rather than taking vows as a lay brother, as most people did when they entered the monastery, he took the lowest position, the donato, and engaged in the menial tasks of service, such as sweeping and cleaning the latrines. Later, he began using his medical skills, and with success was named the head of the monastery's infirmary. There he used herbal remedies and homemade medicines with such success that he became known as a gifted healer. He cared for many sick and injured outside the monastery as well, especially the poor living in wretched conditions in Lima. He also developed a special ministry to African slaves, caring for the sick and providing food. Martin practiced extreme deprivation, bread and water, sleeping on the floor, as well as extreme measures of self-punishment for his sins. Despite his saintly lifestyle, he still considered himself as sinful because of his membership in a society that accepted slavery, scorned the poor, dismissed the humanity of Indians, and practiced other forms of injustice in a supposedly Christian society. Simply said, he did not set himself apart from the sins of his age. Like St. Francis of Assisi, he is said to have had a special relationships with animals and birds, and like St. Francis, when he died, all the city turned out for his funeral. Nevertheless, St. Martin, or Martin de Porres, was not canonized until 1962 by Pope John XXIII, who named Martin de Porres the patron of all who work for social justice. As for Father Marcoux, he was a member of the mathematics faculty in the college. He firmly believed one should live as a witness to one's faith. The Omaha de Porres Club was made up mainly, but not exclusively, of students from Creighton and other area colleges. And so again, a special welcome to all the other area colleges. In the spirit of St. Martin de Porres, who worked for social justice, the club pursued the goal of racial justice in Omaha. What made the club remarkable was its use of nonviolent but militant tactics, a significant number of years ahead of the similar boycotts, sit-ins, and marches that would later garner headlines in the Deep South. Well before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement achieved national and then international prominence, Father Marcoux and the De Porres Club had already steered consciousness and challenged racist attitudes and segregationist practices right here in Omaha. So it is with great pride that the college has offered this lecture series on an annual basis. In the Marcoux de Porres Social Justice Lecture Series, we have the opportunity to listen to and interact with renowned visitors who challenge us to understand and enact social justice with greater love for each other. Again, welcome to this year's lecture. And now I would invite Dr. Roger Bergman to introduce our next featured guest.
Tonight's event is also special because we are going to engage your right brain as well as your left. Please welcome to the stage for two selections, an ensemble from the River City Mixed Chorus under the direction of Dr. Baron Breland of Creighton's Department of Fine and Performing Arts. Their accompanist is Sally Compton. The course's appearance is made possible by the Kennefic Chair in the Humanities, held by Dr. Wendy Wright of the Department of Theology. The River City Mixed Chorus.
Jesus Christ can dry with one embrace, then why can't I reach out to you that way? In my heart I know that fear won't go, and things won't change till I can bring down the walls that rise between us. Bring down the walls, they only divide. They will not fall when fear surrounds us. They will fall when there's nothing to hide. Bring down the walls that hide the truth. So few of us reveal. Can I trust you? Can I show all that I feel? If love can turn the tide, then love can guide and give me strength so I can bring down the walls that rise between us. Bring down the walls, they only divide. They will not fall when fear surrounds us. They will fall when there's nothing to hide. Bring down the walls. I hear a voice inside me. Bring down the walls. Believe that love will set you free. Bring down the walls. Bring down the walls that rise between us. Bring down the walls, they only divide. They will not fall when fear surrounds us. They will fall when there's nothing to hide. Bring down the walls that rise between us. Bring down the walls, they only divide. They will not fall when fear surrounds us. They will fall when there's nothing to hide. Bring down the walls. Bring down the walls. Bring down the walls. Bring down the walls. Bring down the walls.
Thank you very much, Dr. Breland and the River City Mixed Chorus. They'll be in a Christmas concert in about a month, so those of you in Omaha might be on the lookout for that announcement. Andrea Bartoli is the Druzy French Cumby Chair and Dean of the School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University in Virginia, where he has taught since 2007. He works primarily on peacemaking and genocide prevention. Dr. Bartoli has taught in the U.S. since 1994 as the founding director of Columbia University's Center for International Conflict Resolution, a senior research scholar at the School of International and Public Affairs, a teaching fellow at Georgetown University and at the University of Siena. Dr. Bartoli served as Associate Director, Italian Academy for Advanced Studies at Columbia University from 1992 to 1999. His doctorate in anthropology is from the University of Milan. He has been involved in many conflict resolution activities as a longtime leader of the community of Sant'Egidio, headquartered in his home city of Rome, Italy. He has published books and articles on violence, migrations, and conflict resolution, including Somalia, Rwanda, and Beyond, the role of international media in wars and international crisis. The community of Sant'Egidio was founded in Rome in 1960 1968, in the period following the Second Vatican Council. Today it is a church public lay association of more than 50,000, I think I heard him say tonight, 60,000 members, dedicated to evangelization and charity in more than 70 countries throughout the world. The different communities share the same spirituality and principles which characterize the way of Sant'Egidio: prayer, communicating the gospel, solidarity with the poor, ecumenism, and dialogue. Please welcome to the podium my new friend, Dr. Andrea Bartoli, who will speak to us on the theme of Catholics and international peacemaking. Dr. Bartoli.
Thank you. Nice to be here. It's very nice to be here indeed. I'm delighted to be here and to speak with you about Catholics in international peacemaking. Thank you for having me delivering this lecture organized by the Justice and Peace Studies program of Creighton University. I'm particularly grateful to Roger Bergman, indeed, our new friend, there you are, who not only suggested his engagement, but also followed through with extraordinary precision and kindness. I'm quite impressed by his way of doing things. I must admit that I'm learning a lot, so thank you. I understand that this event is part of the Marcou de Port Social Justice Lecture Series, and I'm delighted to be the last in the company of distinguished scholars and speakers. I am even more impressed by the people honored by the lecture series. The idea that a Jesuit mathematician could create a youth group and challenge segregation in the late 40s in the US is indeed remarkable. I'm Italian, I came to this country late in life, and I'm still learning how America is in the making. I definitely honor those Americans who are making America better, freer, more peaceful. It is emblematic also of a Catholic Church social justice stand that I think is crucial to many like me who found the gospel in this church and is so dearly strive for justice while struggling with his own histories and difficulties. John Paul II called all of us to the purification of memory, and none of us know how to do it. I will contend that this is actually a task in many places, not only in the United States, but I think of Rwanda, we mentioned it briefly during the dinner, where this task of purifying the memory is actually more connected to international peacemaking than many may believe. So I am definitely touched by the meaning, the surrounding of this lecture. I want to say a few things before starting the lecture itself and make sure that I offer it in the spirit in which it was prepared. So I will not speak about myself, I will not speak about Sant'Egidio, I will not speak about many of the things that I could speak about, not because I don't want to speak about them, and I'm more than happy to do that in the question and answer period if anybody's interested, but because I felt that this was an invitation for me. And so I used the opportunity to think aloud around things that are of concern for me, and I hope will resonate with you as well. When we think about peace, we think about something harmonious, something that is right, something that is as beautiful as the music that we just heard. Augustine speaks about tranquillitatis ordinis, the tranquility of order. And it's a beautiful image, and it's clearly something that many can relate to when they think peace, peaceful settings, a peaceful moment, a peaceful word. But what if the order is not just What if the tranquility is only for a few? What if many are dying to enforce that order? How tranquil that order is. How can we truly call it tranquil or ordering if this is only for a few, or if some are not exactly included in this? There is no peace, or peace is not complete. I think that the realization of this work in progress, of the world as a work in progress, of our own human experience as a work in progress, our own human conditions as a work in progress, I think is a very important beginning for our conversation tonight. There are many situations in the world today in which peacemaking is needed because peace is not there or it is not complete. I think it's important for us to be welcome into a world in which this peacemaking is not just done by somebody somewhere else, but rather it questions for us as we live in a world that still needs to be whole. So what is the role of Catholics in international peacemaking? Let me present my thought on this through the lens that I just presented before of Father Marcoux, of St. Martin de Porres, of people that spend their life to mend the world, that spend their life to bring about a peace that was possible but not completed, that worked to create the conditions for many to experience the peace that was possible for them and was actually denied it to them by the structures and the patterns of life in which they were born. So I want to present the idea that peacemaking is a form of historical poetry. We can speak about blessed are the peacemakers, and I will do that in my speech. But I was struck when I realized that the verb that Jesus uses is poie. It's not tekne. It's not doing, but it's this doing that has more to do with poetry than to do with practicing. And I think that is an important invitation for all of us, because I do believe that Father Marcoux was actually what I would describe as an historical poet. Somebody that was able to do history in a poetic way. I never met him, I don't know much about him, but I just like the idea that inviting different races to mingle at Creighton was a form of poetry, was a way that we can recognize as when we hear a poem and we say, wow, those words together are so beautiful. They make so much sense. And they help me understand the world as I can see it, and actually I can see the world better because those words were put together by somebody that was gifted in doing that. And I think that Martin de Porres was doing the same. That he was inventing a world that was possible and not actualized. And in doing that, he was revealing to the others that that possibility actually existed. And so people start thinking, oh, it is possible. I can see that. And so similarly to when we respond to a wonderful poem, we respond to Father Marcoux, we respond to Martin de Porres, we respond to what we see happening around us. Because indeed we are our words. We are the words we say. And many people are just unaware of how much the words we are actually true. We don't care careful enough, not only for the language that we share, but for the language that we absorb, for the words that we seek, for the words that we are, for the one that we are longing for. So I insist in saying that peace is the meaning that keeps us hoping. That you are in a segregated society, and then you start thinking that actually it may not be that necessarily true, that you can demonstrate that differently. So I believe that for Father Marcoux and Martin de Porres, peace was a longing and a duty at the same time. It was a longing unrealized of something that is not completed yet, but was certainly a duty of something that had to be done. And in that sense is the infinity between us that called to love authentically every time we meet somebody. For those who like mathematics, I like my little formula. I will explain it another time. But fundamentally, the idea is that between me and you, between you and anybody else, infinity is calling us to something. So I will work on three fundamental concepts. The first is that Catholics have participated in international peacemaking. The second is that Catholics are called to international peacemaking. And the third is that Catholic will never finish to contribute to international peacemaking. So let me elaborate on the first one, but before delving into this, I would like to invite everybody to a moment of silence, partially as an invitation to try to welcome these words in our own life, but also to welcome the victims that we know, the victims of any violence, of any human violence, the ones that did not receive the peacemaking that they needed on time, the ones that have suffered the violence of others, the ones that have been oppressed, excluded, maimed. We would like to honor them together in our own heart. A few years ago, while I was still at Columbia University, I launched a very informal and unstructured survey. I know that some of you are coming from a sociology symposium, so you will be happy to know that even anthropologists sometimes use those instruments. I wanted to know how many Roman Catholic bishops in Africa had been involved in peace work. I defined peace work as intentional and measurable contribution to peace, and I wanted to know how prevalent it was for an African bishop to be actively pursuing it. The methodology was clumsy, and I had only a part-time work-study student to work with me during a few weeks during the summer. But we ended up sending email messages to all the dioceses that had a public email address. It was early 2000, and there were not that many. Unfortunately, I looked for the detail of that survey, but I could not find them. Too many moves. I moved 3 times between then and now, and too many computers, too many other projects. But what I found was a final report identifying 25 bishops that had done peace work. Among them, Jaime Gonçalves of Beira, Mozambique. The result was interesting. More than 25 bishops were signaled having been involved in peace work. And when I asked Gerald Powers at Notre Dame about this a few weeks ago, he sent me a list of 12 cases that was still active from Uganda to the DRC, from Nigeria to Ghana. It's clear that there was a significant role of Roman Catholic bishops in the democratic transitions in Africa in the 90s. There were 8 of them, and 5 were led democratic transition. 5 of them led by bishops. Isidore de Souza in Benin, Basile Mouvet in Gabon, Ernest Kombo in Congo, Philippe Caponso in Congo, Laurent Monswengo in Zaire. There are also others who negotiated with rebels, like Monsignor Biguzzi in Sierra Leone to free children, child soldiers, or Bishop Adam Odoma in northern Uganda, who met with LRA, the Lord Resistance Army, and his leadership in the attempt to end the violence there. You have many examples of people doing peace work, and doing that even from a position of authority as bishops. Why are these anecdotes important to me today when I am exploring Catholics in international peacemaking? It's because The first observation that Catholics have done it. Catholics do it all the time. Not only Catholics at the local level, but Catholics at the highest level, at the hierarchical level. There is a very clear moment when countries are, as in Africa in the last 40 years, transitioning, the role of the Catholic Church becomes more prominent. We actually have patterns there that would be very interesting to study more thoroughly. The Church didn't arrive there easily or unquestionably. But it's interesting for me to see that the belligerent past of the Church experienced a notable shift after Leo XIII, after the emergence of the Catholic social teaching. And that a magisterium pacis emerged out of the popes from Leo XIII on. Out of the repositioning of all Roman pontiffs has been very consistent on peace. You do not find Benedict XVI speaking anything but peace. You don't find John Paul II speaking anything but peace, and so on and so forth. And it's remarkable actually how distant the perception of Catholics, especially in this country, is vis-a-vis the hierarchy. The hierarchy is way beyond, it's way ahead in terms of peacemaking and the understanding of the role of the Church. The peace magisterium is way ahead of what I would contend, the normal lay understanding of these themes. The same is for the death penalty, the same is for many other issues, but on peacemaking is quite remarkable. The shift is indeed remarkable. Still in the midst of the 19th century, the Church was defending its territory militarily and using its influence to make others, especially the Franks, in its defense. The loss of the territories, as well as the emergence of new realities worldwide, moved the Church towards a more prudent appreciation of the suffering, risk, and cost of the war. I'm not making just a moral argument or a spiritual argument, I'm making also an historical argument, a political argument, that the Church losing control of territory clearly revisits quite radically its position vis-à-vis war, but I'm noticing that this is the case. The African bishop did not come into peace work by mistake. They were prepared by centuries of Catholic life and self-understanding that would consider the world as one, all people as open to the gospel, and the Church as servant of humanity. Yet their very presence in the continent was a gift to development. For centuries, European colonial powers had prevented African native local priests to be ordained bishop. In some cases, like Mozambique, this norm and practice lasted well after Vatican II. So we must notice that in the 20th century, the Catholic Church intentionally moved south, promoted the emergence of new political subjects, and participated tremendously in the transformation of the planet as a globalized unit. Its contribution to peacemaking is not only at the moment of the conflict, when the actual tensions arose. Think for a moment about the Cuban crisis and the role of John XXIII. But when a large transformative process of political consciousness holds millions around the globe, liberating them from the oppression of colonialism. In our one and only world, the situation of all people and communities and all nations and states is undergoing an historically unprecedented transformation. Of the almost 200 countries in the world today, only 25 have the same political form of the last 60 years. And some of them are still colonies. One is actually the United States, that is not a new country anymore, actually. It's quite long, it's evolution. In a word, the vast political experiment is in process. Of the almost 7 billion people in our world today, for the first time in history, it is accepted and expected that all people will learn to read and write, will go to school. In a word, the vast cultural release of human creativity is in project. Quite familiar to us, and yet, again, unprecedented, is the explosion of economic productions and of communication technology, bringing us much immediate, unrelenting contact with each other. Moreover, previously, 60 years ago, say, world religion were pretty much on its own sphere. Now intermingling is constant. The Church has participated in this, contributed to this, and in many ways served it. Indeed, not only Catholic individuals, but the Church itself participated in intentional peacemaking. Not just by intervening at the moment of the crisis, but conceiving, conceptualizing, framing this world that is emerging. I think that if you look at international institutions, the Catholic Church is indeed remarkable in its capacity to transcend communities and unite communities, to transcend nation-states and be present in nation-states. It's a fundamental responsibility and contribution that I think many Catholics need to come to terms with, understanding this truly Catholic experience of the Catholicity of the Church. The magnificence of the human genius is being revealed to us, and the hope of making our world truly fit for human dignity is a surging, valid, wise, and valuable dream. However, all these changes challenge and appear to undermine the old ways, the apparently solid and stable certainty about tradition, from which we could take our identity as a community, a person, a state, a nation. That hope appears so fragile, and to this fragility it is added fear. The sentiment of being alone and dislocated permeates all people. The history made by ancestors and grandparents is indeed past. The history we are making together is nebulous. Nonetheless, illuminated by these changes, some factors, I believe, become clear. Every society is made by, and in making this I am articulating a Catholic position of call to be in international peacemaking. Every society is made by men and women, and each society remains incomplete, partial, a mixture of true attainment and violating foolishness. Every society is on the way, on a voyage. Nothing is fixed, all is variable. Every society is an experimental project in learning how to be human together, making a history that children will delight, rather than lament to inherit. No society is the complete, basic model for all the others. Humbly, each is to learn from the others. As our society was made by us, so it can be remade by us and made better. That's the hope. We need to learn from Father Marco. To carry forward this historical experiment, we, every person, every nation, need to cooperate. Failure to do so will repeat the carnage of the last century, where more people were killed by states than by war. That's the fear. This cooperating has its ground in the discoverable fact that we are each instances, incarnation, if you will, of a single humanity, common to each of us. Our unity and likeness far exceed any difference among us. Violence, evil, sin, show in their abominating and blasphemous consequences that violence only begets violence, war begets war, hatred begets hatred. Peace together is indispensable, but violence, evil, sin are our flight from a rejection of our own humanity. And violence, evil, sin are so sedimented in our culture, social order, and personalities that conversion, healing, liberation appears highly improbable. This is why we need people like Martin de Porres to remind us that it is possible to be outside the culture that doesn't recognize, that doesn't welcome, that doesn't. First, the violator violates his own human being, and then he violates the community of others until all exhausted in death. The rampant presence of violating death and fell impotence before sedimented violence and the political use of death, war, violence, and fear. This is the suffering. According, there is a twofold need: to learn more profoundly who we are in our very self, and then to deploy this methodical understanding to discern which element of our heritage are wisely worth retaining, developing, and passing on to the next generation, and which elements in the violating of being human are to be slit off, discarded, so that life of each person is a gift to coming generation. Prime among the gift to be given to the children is peace. But how may we transcend our fears and hatred, our sedimented violating cultural horizon? How we may come together in peace? So the twofold need is added an integrated third need. Who will come to us, all humanity, each and every woman, child, man, each and every cultural group, as gift giver, healer, liberator, friend, bringer of peace, constant companion in making history, teacher of wisdom, artist of joyful play? In which manner will the friend come? There is a crying out, a lamentation, a yearning, surrounded and lifted on the hope, courageous but faith of this love expectant. In many areas of the world, there is an expectation of something happening that doesn't happen. There is an expectation, a longing for this peace that could happen and is not happening. And as Catholic, I think it is essential to frame this as calling. Calling not just for ourselves, but for everyone. Calling for everyone waiting for that fulfillment to be actualized. The yearning for peace is satisfied as this God gives each and all the gift of interior peace, a friendship intimate and profound. This interior peace, this interior companionship flows out into community, so that the quest for peace among all people is a joint project that this friendship of God and each community of person make possible. In this questing for peace, all religious tradition and all cultural tradition have their unique role, for each tradition is a partial realization of the spirit of peace. Now, when in 1986, Pope John Paul II gathered in Assisi leaders of many world religions, communism was still ruling Eastern Europe. Capitalism dominated and still dominated the West. The Soviet Union was the counterbalance to the American power in a long Cold War. That Assisi gathering did not happen in a void. Rather, it was the climax of a long journey guided by a longing for peace, which had been stronger and more articulated over the years in the 20th century. Pope John Paul II was following the step of his predecessor, Benedict XV, who famously defined World War I, a useless slaughter. A crucial turning point of this understanding of the urgent quest of peace, of the futility of war and violence, was the encyclica of Pope John XXIII, Pacem in Terris. Proclaiming in 1963 in the midst of the threat of a nuclear war, the document is an extraordinary invitation to peace, calling for understanding in manner far more comprehensive than usually considered. Peace is not only a product of human making. Peace comes as a gift of friendship. Foremost, peace flows from accepting and responding to being called forth, that each human person is able to discern, moving in that life. Discernment of his vocation to peace is a process involving the whole person, always already in community, and if humbly accepted, inescapably leads to very creative commitments. Through shared creativity, peace among nations and people grows and flourishes. Since 1968, on the initiative of Paul VI, the Catholic Church has celebrated on January 1st, World Day of Peace. Thus, the first day of the yearly secular calendar is marked by a message on the theme of peace. This is a tradition started with Paul VI, continued by all the popes afterward, John Paul II, Benedict XVI now. Pacem in Terris, I want to note, was not only an articulation of these magisterium pacis that I was mentioning at the beginning, was also a controversial document in the United States. The U.S. Catholic Bishop intervened in the debate in 1983 through that letter, Challenge of Peace, and intervened again 10 years later in their reflection, the harvest of justice is sown in peace. They declared in the later document, at the heart of our faith lies the God of peace, who desired peace for all people, far and near. That desire has been fulfilled in Christ, in whom humanity has been redeemed and reconciled. In our day, the Holy Spirit continues to call us to seek peace with one another, so that in our peacemaking we may prepare for the coming of the reign of God, the kingdom of true justice, love, and peace. God created the human family as one and called it to unity. The renewed unity we experience in Christ is to be lived out in every possible way. We are to do all we can to live at peace with everyone. Given the effect of sin, our efforts to live in peace with one another depend on our openness to God's healing grace and the unifying power of Christ's redemption. Catholics received in the last centuries an invitation to share with others the project of receiving the gift of peace and of implementing it, that peace in service of all, especially in serving the poor. The riches of Catholic contemporary understanding of peace emerge clearly in key texts, beginning with the Bible, Pacem in Terris, but also with these uninterrupted messages from Paul VI to today on January 1st. And yet, we notice that this call seems to be far away, removed from us. Many of us, Catholic as I am, do not necessarily recognize these magisterium pacis that I am stressing tonight. May resonate personally, but may not find that sociologically strongly supported in our daily experience as Catholic. That disconnect, it's a very interesting moment of reflection for me. Indeed, I believe that Catholic will never finish to contribute to international peacemaking. The call to peacemake comes directly from the Gospel, and it moves our personal and collective historical consciousness. Peace is made by Jesus on the cross, in his giving his mother and the disciples he loved to one another as mother and son. Peace is made by Jesus on the cross, when he said, Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they are doing. Peace is made by Jesus on the cross, when he welcomed the good thief in paradise. When Jesus shared the Beatitude with the disciples, and I know that we have an expert here, so I should be prudent in my speech. During the Sermon on the Mountain, he said, Blessed are the peacemakers. And as I said previously, the verb that the Gospel of Matthew uses is not tekne, to do building, to construct, but rather koye, creating, inspiring. Catholics have occasionally found a way to practice this peace poetry, making history less violent, less divisive, less destructive. Think of St. Francis, who went to speak with the Sultan, the leader of the Islamic forces, in the midst of the Crusades. In the midst of the Crusade. This is not Francis going in a different moment. Or think of Nicholas von Flue, that after a life of soldiers and farmer and governor, lived as an hermit in his native Switzerland and offered the solution to the Diet of Sten, opening up the possibility for the Confederation to be established and grow for more than 300 years. Or Franz Jagstatter, a consciential objector that lived very close to Pope Benedict and decided not to serve a Nazi army, was killed and then beatified by the German Pope. But today, especially think of Christian de Chargé, the monk who gave his life with 6 others in the mountains of Algeria and wrote one of the most beautiful pieces of literature of the last century, not just in words, but with his own life. Let's listen together for a moment to those words.
This is the half sheet that you have in front of you. This testament was composed by Dom Christian de Charge in Algiers, December 1st, 1993, and produced in Tiberine, January 1st, 1994. It was opened on Pentecost Sunday, 1996, shortly after Dom Christian and others at his Trappist monastery were murdered in Algeria. Some of you may have seen the film of Gods and Men. If it should happen one day, and it could be today, that I become a victim of the terrorism which now seems ready to encompass all the foreigners in Algeria, I would like my community, my church, my family, to remember that my life was given to God and to this country, to accept that the one master of all life was not a stranger to this brutal departure. I would like them to pray for me. How worthy would I be found of such an offering? I would like them to be able to associate this death with so many other equally violent ones allowed to fall into the indifference of anonymity. My life has no more value than any other, nor any less value. In any case, it has not the innocence of childhood. I have lived long enough to know that I share in the evil which seems, alas, to prevail in the world, and even in that which would strike me blindly. I should like, when the time comes, to have a space of lucidity which would enable me to beg forgiveness of God and of my fellow human beings, and at the same time to forgive with all my heart the one who would strike me down. I could not desire such a death. It seems to me important to state this. I don't see, in fact, how I could rejoice if the people I love were indiscriminately accused of my murder. It would be too high a price to pay for what will be called, perhaps, the grace of martyrdom, to owe this to an Algerian, whoever he may be, especially if he says he is acting in fidelity to what he believes to be Islam. I know the contempt in which Algerians, taken as a whole, can be engulfed. I know, too, the caricatures of Islam, which encourage a certain idealism. It is too easy to give oneself a good conscience in identifying this religious way with the fundamentalist ideology of its extremists. For me, Algeria and Islam is something different. It is a body and a soul. I have proclaimed it often enough, I think, in view of and in the knowledge of what I have received from it, finding there so often that true strand of the gospel learned at my mother's knee, my very first church, precisely in Algeria, and already respecting believing Muslims. My death, obviously, will appear to confirm those who hastily judge me naive or idealistic. Let him tell us now what he thinks of it. But these must know that my insistent curiosity will then be set free. This is what I shall be able to do, if God wills. Immerse my gaze in that of the Father, to contemplate with him his children of Islam as he sees them, all shining with the glory of Christ, fruit of his passion, filled with the gift of the Spirit, whose secret joy will always be to establish communion and to refashion the likeness, playing with the differences. This life lost, totally mine and totally theirs, I thank God who seems to have wished it entirely for the sake of that joy and in spite of everything. In this thank you, which is said for everything in my life, from now on, I certainly include you, friends of yesterday and today, and you, O my friends of this place, besides my mother and father, my sisters and brothers and their families, 100-fold, as was promised. And you too, my last-minute friend, who will not know what you are doing. Yes, for you too I say this thank you and this adieu, to commend you to this God, in whose face I see yours. And may we find each other happy, good thieves in paradise, if it pleases God, the Father of us both. Amen.
Christian de Chargé, many of you may have known him through the movie Gods and Men Now, was a friend of ours. He was translating in Arabic to the meetings that the community of Sant'Egidio was doing after Assisi. John Paul II had an intuition of calling in Assisi that meeting, and that meeting was supposed to die, to stop after the first one. The community of Sant'Egidio took on the responsibility of doing it again, and Christian was one of those who was helping. He was a dear friend of ours. It takes a while to write those words. It takes a while to live that life. It takes a while for us to understand those words and that life. Are we done then? Is peace among us? Do we truly believe that there is no need for peace work? Or do we welcome, we do come out of this lecture with a vivid sense that not only peace comes from deep sources of the Catholic faith, but is also deep embedded in the tradition expressed by all recent pontiffs and millions of faithful around the world, and especially where human suffering has been the greatest. There is work to do, a lot of work to do. Some of it is truly amazingly possible. Think of global project on Catholic peacemaking. Think of interviewing all Catholic bishops in the planet, to think ways to connect all Catholics who are actively doing peace work. The potential is immense and the need is great. The call is one and the work will not end anytime soon. Thank you for welcoming it tonight.